When I tell people, oh, I love these books, they changed my life, they're about lesbian necromancers in space, I feel like the reaction has this kind of energy of like, oh, what a fun turn of phrase, what a jokey oversimplification, lesbian necromancers in space. And I have to be like, no, no, no. It says that on the cover of the book. This book makes a vow to you about lesbian space necromancer content contained therein, and it delivers on that promise beyond your wildest dreams. Hey, I'm Lizard Leigh, and I promise I am not just here to yell about book recommendations. I'm actually here to make a book cosplay. Because man, it's a whole separate challenge designing and making a costume when there are no visual references. So I wanted to dive into what that process looks like. First, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about these books and why I wanted to cosplay this character, and then we'll go into transforming all of this into like a corporeal outfit that exists in the real world. I feel like over the last few years, there's been so much more cosplay of characters from podcasts or streams that don't have official art, that are just based off of verbal descriptions. I think it's neat as hell to see cosplay going in this direction where people are conceptualizing their own ideas of characters, and I'm excited to do that today. This video is going to be as spoiler-free as I can humanly make it. I am not assuming that you have read these books, and frankly, if I'm the one convincing you to read these, I really want you to experience them the way I did without knowing all of the everything that happens so much. The only spoiler-adjacent things that I kind of have to include are physical descriptions of the character, and that character is Ianthe Tridentarius. Thank you, audiobook, for that pronunciation. The books are Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. There are 2 more books coming out next year and the year after. So far away. And the name of the series is The Locked Tomb. Also, hey, y'all, before we barrel into the whole process and have a good time, I just want to take an honesty moment and say that for real, October was kind of a rough time for me. I had a lot of gigs and money stuff come up, and I was dealing with some family things that took me out of town for a lot of the month, and it meant that I had to shelve a lot of the projects that I really care about. Like, I wasn't able to put up new videos here, and I had to cut a lot of accessories and details from this cosplay that I really wanted to have finished. It sucked. And thank God, or thank the Necrolord Prime for sewing. I wouldn't be a cosplayer if I didn't love the, flow state of just putting on an audiobook, you can guess which audiobook, and sewing for hours and hours. Also, I know I'm making this cosplay for a group shoot with 2 of my good friends, Nora and Ginny, which is a thing I haven't done since the ancient days. So it wasn't the October I had planned, but it was still an October that had a lot of good in it. And I'm here to share that good process of becoming the terrible galactic necromancer of my dreams. It's made me really happy, and I hope it makes you happy too. I can have a little talking about these books as a treat. I really do think it's the most elegant way to capture the vibes of these books is to say that they're about lesbian necromancers in space, because it's such a disarmingly blunt sentence. It's so evocative, and it kind of makes you feel like, did I really just hear that combination of words? And honestly, that sets you up perfectly for what it's going to be like reading these books. When I recommend them to people, I say the thing about lesbian necromancers in space, and I also tell people I have never read anything else like these books. You can't compare them to anything else. Honestly, it's hard to even describe them, but I am gonna try. What makes the writing of these books so unique is the way that the author, Tamsin Muir, combines just the most beautiful, visceral prose, profoundly incisive and uncanny ways of describing these characters and their actions and motivations in this world. She takes this beautiful writing that you feel in your body and combines it with the language of a shitpost or a meme. These books have so many memes. And from a lesser writer, one of those should cheapen the other. It should end up like a bad action movie, but somehow it works. Somehow these really juxtaposing elements, instead of deflating each other, it's like they heighten each other. It's so weird how she pulls it off. It's just good writing. Honestly, the closest comparison I could give, even though they're totally opposites in subject matter, is parts of the first book really do remind me of one of my all-time favorite movies, Mad Max Fury Road, in that it doesn't take you by the hand and say, oh, this is this world, this is what the symbol means, this is what these people do. Mad Max Fury Road just chucks you in the passenger seat of a car chase in this immensely rich and detailed world and says, oh, you'll figure out the rest of it, and like, you're off. Gideon the Ninth does very much the same thing. There is no gentle, here's how necromancy works in this world. There is no, here's a biography of the Emperor undying. There is no like, when a necromancer and a cavalier love each other very much, something magical happens. It kind of just throws you in it. Book 2 is like that, but if the flow of time keeps jumping around and you're not really sure which reality the road is on, and also the driver of the car chase is trying to actively push you out of the moving car as it's happening. Harrow the Ninth is one of the best books I've ever read, and it is a book that fights you back almost every step of the way. I think it's a masterpiece, and I genuinely have to warn people about it because it is that intentionally difficult of a read. If you're like, yeah, how hard and weird can it be? Solidly half of this book is written in second person. I never thought I would read a book in second person, let alone enjoy it, let alone recommend it and cosplay from it. But here we are. I could keep going and accidentally trap you in a 4-part, 6-hour series about why I love these books and why you should read them, but I'm gonna stop there. I love these books. I had forgotten what it was like to love books this much. I had forgotten what it was like to love anything this much. Reading the first book, I didn't really have my cosplayer goggles on. I was too busy absolutely hoovering up all of the homosexuality and skeletons. I knew I had friends who were planning on cosplaying Gideon or Harrow, and I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, I really see parts of myself in Gideon, I really see parts of my younger self in Harrow. I'm kind of just gonna read the second book and see if the cosplay spirits move me. As I read the second book, it just became apparent to me that this wasn't actually a skeleton girl binary. There was a third option, and her name was Ianthe Tridentarius. Ianthe is a twin, and when we meet her, she's primarily described as being just like the crappier version of her twin sister. Corona Beth, said sister, is described as being, you know, bright and beautiful. She has like luminous gold hair, she has tawny glowing skin. She wears a lot of jewelry and flashy clothes and pulls it off in this kind of like, oh, I accidentally over-accessorized kind of way. Ianthe, in contrast, is described as being like borderline anemic looking, just sheets of flat, colorless hair. And when she wears the gaudy clothing, it gives very like burial shroud mummy vibes. Very, oh, that's just a creepy haunted doll. Which twin do you want to cosplay, the hot one or the shitty one? I'll cosplay the shitty one, thank you. Ianthe doesn't seem like much when we first meet her, and I just can't spoil you on what kind of stuff she gets into because some choices are made. If I were to describe Ianthe in just one word, it would be terrible. She just totally sucks in a way that makes me go, that one, right there, that's the character I love. I actually had a hard time putting my finger on why exactly I liked this character so much. She's clearly someone who loves very deeply and has a lot of humanity and is also really messed up and wears a lot of tacky outfits and has a terrible personality. I couldn't figure it out until I read this interview from the author. Actually, let me pull it up real quick. She was asked by Tor.com, the publisher, how did you come up with Ianthe's personality? She's absolutely horrible, terrifying, and uniquely funny at the same time. And Tamsin Muir answered, I love Ianthe and could write a lot about Ianthe, but one central thing I'm doing with Ianthe is playing around with a trope male characters often get to be, and one frequently found in Slash, but so little for the lesbians. Ianthe is in many ways my gay Draco in leather pants. Redacted for mild spoilers. The Draco in leather pants trope, the hyper-privileged drawling blonde with daddy issues who sulks erotically in a corner, is perpetually male. Here, it's Ianthe. And Ianthe blows. She'll never be a true Draco in leather pants because although the DILP gets great sassy lines, very few of them are aimed at himself. Ianthe's humanity, what there is of it, comes from having a sense of humor. It's why she is sympathetic and also why she is dangerous. When I read this, it was like the biggest bass drop of my life. Of course I fell in love with this character. This is literally a character I've fallen in love with before. I love an unlovable character. I love a character who's antagonist, adjacent, but definitely not an anti-hero, and I love Ianthe Tridentarius. I finished the second book, and less than 48 hours, I had bought fabric for this cosplay. With like half of my sketch done and even less than half of an idea of what I was actually doing, I was just excited to be excited about cosplaying again. Since I told myself I couldn't do any new cosplays until I fully reorganized my sewing studio, which took forever, and I also still haven't edited into a video, I will do that. I didn't actually end up getting started on this cosplay until the fall. Actually, the first video I made for this channel is me making the pants for this cosplay. So this week I'm focusing on the shirt and also going into the kind of general overarching design considerations for making this terrible lesbian a reality. The first step in getting this cosplay together, honestly, was taking a night and going up on my roof to just take notes in a Google Doc on all the times that a physical description of Ianthe comes up in the books. Because of the way the author writes, most of these were less specific descriptions and more evocation of vibes. She made herself like an over-decorated cake, covered so thickly in icing and fondants and gums that it would take serious excavation to find any bread. I also really like her paste blonde hair fell lankily over a face that should have been beautiful and over shoulders that should have been exquisite, but only contributed to the general impression of a wax figure in a pink dolly dress. Basically, we're trying to cosplay someone who is trying too hard with the outfits and not pulling it off, which is fantastic if you're someone like me who already over-designs everything. In addition to Ianthe herself, we also have some wider clues from the house that she comes from and also from how her sister's clothing is described. She is from the third house. There are 9 houses in this solar system. The third house's color themes, because what is the point of creating anthropological divisions in a sci-fi story if they aren't color-coded, is gold with purple accents. Tor, the publisher, put out this guide to the houses, so we're aiming for this guy. They're a very gaudy house, they're a very fashionable house, they're the house with big MTV Cribs energy. They are the kind of house that would do well on a reality show by just stirring the pot when things got boring. I identify with all of this very, very much. Corona Beth, the twin sister's clothing, is very consistently described as being very sheer, very plunging, very gauzy and like clinging, so let's be clear, this is not a modest look. Like, yes, we're aiming for a kind of creepy lace Victorian doll, but we are gonna show some skin too. And lastly, if we zoom all the way out, the wider world of these novels themselves exists somewhere between science fiction and fantasy. This fucking rules from a costume design perspective. Like, combining all of these very fantasy elements, the things that I associate with like a spellcaster or a sword fighter, along with the fact that we are in a world with spaceships, is like, it's so tight. It's just such an exciting balance to strike. The challenge of looking anachronistic in a futuristic world, the fact that I really love the aesthetic of gold and purple and a little too extra, and the fact that I really love this character, it's like they made a pizza with all of my favorite toppings for this cosplay. So that's what we've got from the books. Our next step is finding some jumping off points from fashion and costuming. What I mean by this is making just a massive Pinterest board. Luckily, since big cottagecore Edwardian style blouses are very in right now, I was able to put together a lot of images and get some ideas going about the silhouette and the detailing. As I'm putting together these references, I'm not just thinking about what would look how I would want, I'm also thinking about what would be fun to make. I'm choosing to go this hard on a book character because I think it'd be fun and fulfilling, so I'm not going to design something that I think would be miserable to construct. For me and my brain, having anchor points in designs are really helpful so I don't get totally lost down a what am I even doing rabbit hole. And one of my anchor points for this project was extremely practical. It's called 1, I picture Ianthe wearing pants, like I definitely wanted that for the build. 2, I hate drafting pants. 3, I already have a pants pattern. So my anchor point was that I knew I was going to be at least starting with a base pattern I already had, which left me with a lot of kind of drafting bandwidth brain cells to burn on her shirt and make it really unique. At this point, before I even started sketching, I actually made a wish list for the shirt, which sounds weird, but it helped me prioritize what I actually wanted to get out of this shirt that I might not get from a generic blouse. Basically, why I'm building it instead of just thrifting it. I wanted to have modular sleeves and also a detachable neck ruff. These were my big non-negotiable dreams because my ultimate goal with this build is to make an Ianthe cosplay that can switch between Ianthe as we first meet her in book 1 and Ianthe as the story progresses in the second book. Buried deep within my psyche somewhere is the child I once was, who saw cargo pants that zipped off into cargo shorts and thought, that is the freshest shit. I love modularity. I love a cosplay that can become another cosplay, and with how much Ianthe changes in this story, I mega wanted to build something, maybe not zip off cargo shorts, but something that can build into like 3 different versions of her depending on how I wear it. So the reason why I really want to have sleeves that I can wear at full length or that I can have kind of tuck up into a half or a 3/4 length is because Ianthe at some point, for some time, for some reason, I'm trying not to spoil this, she does have an arm that takes the form of a golden skeleton arm, which is so cool. I actually already started working on making a skeleton illusion arm for this costume, but unfortunately about a day into it, I realized that it was just too time consuming and I would have to shelve it for a later wear, so it will be makeup for this time. With the aforementioned Nightmare October, I want to be clear that I'm not even attempting to make most of the alternate versions I had sketched. I'm not making the detachable neck ruff I designed for this wear, and I'm not making the iridescent robes that are described in the book. It breaks my heart, but I know I don't have the time, so I'm just making sure I'm leaving these options open so that in the future I can add these later. Honestly, I'm not a visual artist, but these sketches get the job done, showing 2 different views of this design. So we've got the version with the really extra kind of collar ruff, and we've also got a decent look at the shirt on its own. These sleeves are going to have an opaque upper half to mask whatever skeleton arm I have turns into my actual human arm, and then a sheer bottom half with a split for vibes and also to tuck up as needed. I'm mostly going to be embellishing as I go, but I know I have a really cool metallic gold trim in my stash that I want to have as a vertical stripe on the pants and sleeves. This also adds a really contemporary athleisure sort of energy to this otherwise really old school look. I'm not setting any hard plans for the collar since I know realistically I am going to do that last. Let's talk about fabric selection also, because honestly, since I went out and bought fabric for this immediately after I finished the book, there is kind of like a chicken and egg dance happening with the design and the fabrics. I picked up 2 main fabrics for the shirt, one of which is an incredibly sheer linen. Look at that, you can see me through it, hello. And the other of which is a more opaque kind of cotton blend. Both of these are actually screen printed with a metallic gold on one side of the fabric, which is really cool. It means that they have this really interesting, like they move like a linen or a cotton, but they look really metallic, especially under the right lighting. I thought this would be a really cool way to kind of thread those needles between futuristic, spacey, and anachronistic, because it doesn't look like lame, it doesn't look like a cheap metal. Also, I knew the kind of unbleached cotton color of these fabrics would read very old school, very fantasy. The pants are actually an upholstery velvet. I just like the velvet. I liked the low pile of it that I felt like I could wear it without totally crushing it. But yeah, those are velvet pants that I made. A thing that is profoundly exciting to me is that the waistband on the pants, that kind of belt and yoke situation, that is actually fabric from the first cosplay I ever made myself. That is fabric from my 2010 build of Envy from Fullmetal Alchemist, a cosplay so horrifying that I am not going to include it in this video. I love reusing fabric from old builds, and I love that I got to give this nightmare hot glued train wreck of a cosplay a second life. As far as the trim, I did buy some trim here and there, but largely this is trim from my stash. One of the things that I do in this workspace is I have a drawer that is just for kind of like current things I maybe might use in designs. So right now, one of these drawers is just trim, rhinestones, beads, things that I might put in Ianthe. For a while now, I've actually been embellishing some lace trim. It's just kind of been my like long car ride, or if I'm on a flight to go see my girlfriend project. I am primarily planning on using that high yardage for the neck ruff, but I'm gonna be including a little bit of it on the sleeves to like bring the details together. I also will say I picked this specific lace trim because I like the way the flower design actually feels a little like it could be a gemstone, and a lot of the third motifs involve gemstones, so trying to get that like faceted energy. In a minute here, I'm going to show you the mock-up before I seam ripped it, which I've already done. If you've read the books, I'm sure you're really appreciating all of the different timeline jumping around that I'm doing in this video. I'm sure you feel right at home. You know, in case I've lost the thread with all of my kind of like, here are all the things I'm thinking about, let me try and do a quick summary. We are making a shirt that's going to try and combine the kind of energy of like a fantasy linen shift with some bold metallics. We're gonna be throwing a lot of gold trim and lace on it. We are gonna be aiming for something that can be worn in a very tight-laced way and that can also be kind of opened up. The shirt is going to have some really extra sleeves that can be worn multiple different ways, depending on, you know, if you have two arms made of flesh or if maybe one of them is made of bone at one point. And we are designing all of this knowing that hopefully in the future I will be adding a more detailed optional ruff or a more detailed cloak to go over the shoulders. Gosh, I think that's everything. I hope that's everything. Let's go do the dang thing. I feel like my mock-ups are always so ugly that I feel almost like a little self-conscious showing you my mock-up. Most of this is self-drafted and draped. As a jumping off point, I used a Edwardian corset cover pattern that I have for the fronts and the back, because I really wanted this to have that nice kind of fullness from the curved bottom. I also like that the gathering is only in the front, so the back is nice and smooth. I had to redraft the shoulder seam. I had to replace the arm side. I made the arm side pretty big, which meant that these sleeves took frickin' forever to draft. Got this fun little split opening on the forearm. It attaches with a cuff down here. This arm, the way it works is you can uncuff it and then just tuck it up in there. I'll pop it on to show you. But that way when I have the skeleton arm and I really want it to be highlighted, I can have asymmetrical sleeves, but then I can also wear it as a normal shirt if I so choose. The collar I kind of wanted to get weird with, and I haven't totally landed on my plan. Let me spin it around so you can see the back. I'm gonna be adding some kind of yoke in the top to the back and the front to keep it stable. Let me put this on real quick just so you can sort of see the bare bones. Yes, I am the kind of person that just pins myself into my own mock-ups. What I like about this is that, you know, I want the option to be very tight-laced, but then I also want the option to, you know, live my full, terrible pirate fantasy. Look at these arms. Look at this arm patterning. Look at how much motion they have. Wow. So, you know, yeah, the mock-up is not 100% complete, as you can tell, but for my comfort level, this is an absolutely acceptable level of, okay, the plan is good enough, let's start making moves. So I'm gonna seam rip this and I'm gonna transfer all the pieces to pattern paper because I like this pattern and I think I could use it for some other things in the future. So because the fabric I'm using for the main fronts and backs is a really, really loose weave, it's gonna be really important to get the grain line super correct as I'm cutting up my pattern pieces. So that means that I'm using a technique that I'm often way too lazy for. I'm pulling out a few threads from the length of fabric so that I can see the exact right angle of the grain line. I'm taping it down so I can cut a single layer on my cutting mat. It's really time consuming, but it means that in the end, my pieces come out draping really correctly, really on the grain line. It cost me a few hours, but I think it's totally worth it because I know this shirt is going to drape deliciously. Because it's all going to be visible, I'm mostly using French seams, and French seams are where you sew fabric wrong sides together first instead of right sides together first usually, and then you flip it over a second time and sew another seam, encasing the allowance in it. There's better tutorials out there, but that is the method that I am using to make sure that when you see the seams on the inside, it looks okay. I did decide to go ahead with the yoke in the fronts and the backs. I'm having the gold fabric facing out so that it will look really shiny on the outside. I'm also not sewing down the bottom of the yoke, so it's just kind of free floating underneath of there. Again, because it's gonna be visible, because it's a see-through shirt, I'm being really fastidious with all the little rolled hems. Because it's curved lines, it's like a true nightmare, but we're getting it done and it's gonna look beautiful and it's what she deserves. I want to zhuzh it up a little bit. I don't want to waste too much time on something that is hidden beneath another layer of fabric, but I want to add a little detail. So I pulled some lace from my stash, and I've decided that I'm going to be adding rows of 3, the 3 rows of course being for the 3rd house. Also, there's a lot of recurring 3s in Ianthe's like narrative, so 3 is the magic number. I will also say that I'm spray basting down this lace before I sew it on. Quilting spray based is honestly one of my new favorite notions from the last year. It makes things like braid or really small, really fiddly trims a total dream to actually get on the fabric. It makes life so much easier. Because I'm using a lot of stash trim and embellishment, honestly, a lot of this process is me like just taking things out from my stash and laying it on the fabric and going, does this work? Is this too much? Is this the right amount of too much? And like peering at it and just being at it for a very long time. I will say also my New Yorker hack is that I almost never do my own buttonholes because there's a place called Jonathan Embroidery on I think 38th maybe that will just do buttonholes for you on their industrial machines. As far as the buttons themselves, I picked up these mother of pearl guys from, I think, Pacific Trimming, and I love them. I love that they're actual mother of pearl, which is a very kind of historical material, but they have a design that almost looks like an atom or something on it, again, in a like multiple of 3 kind of pattern, so I really love the combination of historical and futuristic that we get with these buttons. You know, there's a very real chance that I'm going to spend the plane ride to Denver just hand sewing on sequins and beads in multiples of 3 somehow.
This is exactly what happened. I did spend the whole plane ride hand sewing. Honestly, if I have a cosplay deadline, I almost always have some hand sewing to do when I'm en route, so this felt wildly and comfortingly normal after so long without cosplay shoots. Once I got to my friend Ginny's house, I finished the final seams. It was a bit of a crunch and I didn't have time to grab progress footage, but I did have time to get this very important shot right before our shoot.
You know this. You know me no feed you. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, we did it, y'all. In the spirit of these books, there's only one way that I can end this story, and that is with a dramatic plot twist. So, look at that, look at her. The plot twist, as you might have guessed with this, is that you're gonna watch me seam rip off this collar. So it might seem like an unexpected way to end this journey of making a shirt to show me taking apart the shirt. But I really wanted to illustrate that, you know, you should do what makes you happy in cosplay. And a lot of the time what makes me happy is going back and redoing past work that was just a little bit rushed. This is a cosplay that I plan to continue working on for quite some time. I'm really hoping this can be like a kind of background project that I can switch into in between other bigger, flashier, more convention-focused builds. I am so happy with this and I love how this turned out. And that's why I'm CMRPing it so that I can make it an even better version the next time. Since this was kind of like a very fiddly and detailed build, if you want to check out a build that is very large, very oversized, on a very different scale level than this level of detail work, I definitely recommend checking out my D&D merchant video that I made talking about how I took the idea of a D&D session and designed it in the style of like a Legend of Zelda fantasy merchant. I'm definitely planning on doing more big builds like that, and I'm also planning on doing more small little detailed builds like this one. So thank you for joining me here, and if you like this and do want to see more of this process over the next few weeks and months, let me know. And if you read these books, you are legally obligated to tell me, so that's a joke. No, please don't take it literally. Please don't feel obligated. But if you do read these books because of this video, it would make my year to find out about it. You know, whatever story you're really loving on this week, I hope you're having a great time with it. I hope you're making weird, cool stuff, and I hope I see you here next week.